Kanchi Kiowa, hello, how are you all? Welcome to Homelands, originally broadcast on CFCR Community Radio 90.5 FM in Saskatoon, Homelands of the Métis and Treaty 6 Territory, CFCR.ca. This is your favorite auntie, Andrea Letting Dishni Kashoon. My name is Andrea Letting. Call me Auntie Andy if you like, and I'll be your host over this next half hour. I am part settler, part relative, and 100% ally in relation to everyone. I'm just me, not a card-carrying member of any Indigenous nation, but I am loved, adopted, related to, and accepted by many, rejected by a few, but haters gonna hate, relators gonna relate. I am blessed to have Indigenous relations in my family and secretly may love them a little bit more than all the rest, only because they're the first peoples of this land who welcomed all the guests. But I also have some Irish and Scandinavian, along with a little bit of mystery. And that's the way I was raised, strongly decolonial and justice-oriented, with a big related heart for all. I used to say anti-colonial, but my last guest pointed out that it sounded like I was calling myself Auntie Andy and anti-colonial. And he was like, why would you call yourself anti-colonial? So I'm anti-colonial as in against it, but I'm not an anti of colonialism. So I most empathize with my Batosh Métis friends and family and that history and culture growing up. And as an adult have continued to try to live that Mi'opamitsuin, that beautiful good life. So from the fringes of the sash, I situate myself as a relative and an ally and welcome you, my listeners, as brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews in the Homelands. So let's welcome our relative tonight. And we have with us the very lovely Falynn, who is an amazing recording artist who on December 4th is singing with the Saskatoon Symphony in Cree. And I'll just let her kind of introduce herself and talk a little bit about herself, Falynn Baptiste. So welcome.
Thank you. That was a wonderful introduction. I enjoyed every moment of it. Falynn Baptiste na Tasiga Sun, but present Niaja. Agamayna, Cumberland House, Saskatchewan. Nikiskano Magwan, Uta Edifian, Agamina, and Nigamwan. I'm a singer as well. Hello, everybody. My name is Falynn Baptiste. I'm from the Red Pheasant First Nation where I grew up, but I have strong family ties, proud family ties to Cumberland House, Saskatchewan. I am Cree Métis. I'm a teacher, grade 12 teacher for the Mi'omachuan program here at Edifian High School in Saskatoon, as well as a music artist.
Fantastic. So tell us about your journey in music. I mean, did you kind of always sing and growing up, did you sing? And yeah, tell us about kind of your journey as a musician.
My mom told me that I started singing at a very young age, 2-3 years old. So she called me Lala as a toddler. My dad was a musician in the 70s, and my kukum was a singer in ceremony. My family members were part of a power singing group, and so music has always been a part of my family. Later on in life, as a child, I started taking singing lessons and studied music theory, classical music, and that would just kind of be the jumping off point to performing as an artist when I was a teenager.
Fantastic. So, I mean, do you get nervous singing, or do you love singing? When there's an audience, how do you feel about singing as a performance?
I've always enjoyed sharing music. Being on stage, however, there's various stages. There's the realization that you're going to be in front of people, which is also always really nerve-wracking. You worry about how you're going to sound, what they're going to think. Then there's the just before you get on stage, which is, the mindfulness and the, all the calming down exercises that you do. And then there's that brief moment of actually being on stage and the vulnerability of sharing, an organic sound. And it's so short that moment is really enjoyable, that connecting to the listeners and just being in a moment of beauty, I guess, between singing, your listeners enjoying the music, and then the performance being over. And then the last stage it's kind of melancholy because it's over.
Wow, that's a great way to describe performing, right? There's kind of all these stages to it. Um, so for the symphony, singing with the symphony, what kind of preparation is involved, and what is all of that like? Can you describe it for listeners?
Into, my mid-30s, I'm a more confident person. And so going into performance, I'm less nervous and more appreciative of the opportunity to share song and still um, uh, having the opportunity to be on stage. And so, am I nervous? A little bit, but I'm more so just excited. I'm excited to share the language on that capacity, and excited to sing on a big stage with all of the, high tech sound equipment and the orchestra. And so I'm really just looking forward to being in the moment and appreciating the moment that maybe I'll never have that opportunity again. So.
I mean, it's pretty exciting to have, like, so how many people are in the orchestra? Like 50 or 100, or like how big is the?
I don't even know. Like, I've received the tracks to practice and study, and it sounds like there's quite a bit of instruments, string instruments, percussions, violins, the wind instruments, piano. So I think it sounds like it's going to be quite impressive. So
Full
yeah.
orchestra, basically. Yeah, that's
Well,
wow,
I
that's
believe so.
exciting.
I don't know
Yeah,
for sure, but
yeah,
it sounds like that's what it'll be. So.
amazing. And so with your preparation, so do you guys rehearse together? Like, you have the tracks and you sing along with those, and then do you do like a live rehearsal before the actual performance on December 4th, or?
My understanding is we have a dress rehearsal, like maybe do a sound check, a dress rehearsal, and then it's the show. So not a lot of together preparation. So thank goodness I've been at this for a while. I'm like, okay, I can do this.
That's awesome.
And prayer helps. Prayer
Yeah.
always helps.
That's the most important part for me. um Wow, so that's really exciting. So now, I mean, you kind of mentioned this in passing as you were talking, but something really unique that you've been known for like a long time. Like, I remember somebody telling me years ago, "Oh, you've got to hear this young woman sing," and she sings like, I can't remember if it was like Ave Maria or it was like a classical, or maybe it was a Christmas hymn, right? Because you're known for those, but it was, it was in Cree, right? It's in the Cree language. It's so beautiful. And I remember listening to the recording and going, wow. So I can't remember if I was doing a story on you or it was just kind of in passing that someone said, listen to this. But so tell us more about how you began incorporating the Cree language into well-known classics and that kind of thing, and the repertoire for this concert, of course, but just like overall kind of talking about using language in music.
I suppose it started when I was a little girl. We often went to church. Like we followed our Cree spirituality and our ceremonies, but we also had a respect for the church. And so my family would go to church on Sundays. And the music ministry, or the ministry that came out, the First Nations ministry that came out to the surrounding First Nations in the Battlefields, brought hymns that were already translated in Cree. And so that's where I learned to read the Cree language. Most First language speakers, for example, my mom and my dad, they can't quite read or write the language. They can sound it out, phonetically, and write phonetically. So that would be probably where I learned to actually read and write Cree. And so that kind of led to requests of people who just wanted to hear Cree in a contemporary song, a gospel song. So quite often, as early, I think 12, 13, I was performing Amazing Grace in Cree at conferences or opening ceremonies. And then that led to the Canadian anthem being sung in Cree. I think one of my first performances for that was the Olympic torch relay that came through North Battleford, and we hosted the Olympics at that time. And then that led to various other requests to come to hockey games, sports games, conferences, functions to sing the Canadian anthem in Cree. And so I think what happened each time I would sing a contemporary song in Cree is it's the power of the language. Like if you speak to any, elder or any first language language keeper, for example, they will connect you to the Indigenous ways of knowing that tells us that the language is directly tied to who we are as Nehewak. It's tied to our spirit and our soul. So when people hear the language sung in a contemporary setting, there's just this connection that's made. It doesn't necessarily need to be people who know the language. And it's what I tell my students all the time here. You don't have to know the language to have a connection to it, because like my dad said, it runs in our blood. It's part of who we are. So there's just some sort of spiritual awakening that happens to hearing our language sung in a contemporary setting or any setting. But at least that's what I think it is.
That's beautiful. Yeah, no, I think that's explained really well. I've talked with one good friend of mine who so she was a 60s scoop but she said the first time an elder spoke Cree to her and she was like, I understand, right? Like it was just like a blood memory, like it was just that connection. So I think there's something really beautiful about that, and it's such a beautiful language, like the meanings of the words and the way they go together, and it's such a spiritual language, right? And it's got a whole worldview in it, and it's connected to the lands that we're on, and yeah, it's a really beautiful kind of mission that you have, to share the Cree language in song. So tell us more about this upcoming symphony concert on December 4th. It's a Christmas carols mostly, or yeah. Can you tell us a bit about the repertoire without? I don't know if you're not allowed to give it away, or if it's like, yeah, okay. Talk about, yeah.
As a guest artist, the symphony brings in a local artist, I think, each year for the pop series. And Mark Turner contacted me last year. I released my Christmas Cree album last year. And so he contacted me then and said, we want to work with you and have you come to the symphony. And being in the time we were in with the pandemic, live concert shows were just not happening at that time. And so we reconnected throughout the spring, summer, and then finally in the fall, and made plans. And they brought me in as their guest artist. And so I'll be sharing a couple of the songs. I'll be doing a hybrid version to cater to the Indigenous and non-Indigenous listeners in the crowd. But I think it's a nice marrying of the two worlds. So yeah.
Nice. So you'll be singing some in Cree, like you'll be singing songs that have both Cree and English kind of thing is what you're kind of doing? Yes. Or yeah. So yeah. Nice. So I mean, we're kind of like, we're getting close to the halfway point, so maybe this is like a good opportunity to just kind of run. So we have like you said it was like about 10 years old, this clip, this YouTube video or something like that?
About 8 years ago. Each time I do music, it's part of almost my own little personal healing journey. So each time something comes about, there's something happening in my life. I've gone through a challenge to get to a point where I'm in an optimal place to sing. So 8 years ago, I was going through a transition in my life, and moving from a place that maybe wasn't so healthy to a healthier place, a more positive place. And so 8 years ago, I worked with the musician Keith Bartlett, and we recorded these and uploaded them on YouTube. And that went, I think there's over 10,000 views. There's quite a few views on those videos. And it was basically a hit record and go. So it was very organic, very raw, very real. And he's so talented. And yeah, those were the videos 8 years ago.
Fantastic. So we're going to listen to What Child Is This, which has nearly 30,000 views. So I will just, share the screen here. And here we go.
Kanaweji Gewakasti Kichimantu Awa Kanita Wiketuman Kipamami Chini Awamari Bokosisa Itamawami Towina Astameke Atamesa Awasis baby go here Myotehiwa Sagi Hewa Kichimantu Awa Kanita Wiketuman Kipamami Jimmy Awamari Okosisa.
Ah, that was beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh, wow. Oh, I just had chills. And I love that song too. It's such a beautiful song.
It is. I mean, you talk about the language being beautiful. What maybe non-Cree speakers don't know is the language is so descriptive, and when you retranslate it back into English, it almost tells a different story. You know?
Yeah, talk a little bit about that, like because I was catching words, like I'm not fluent in Cree, but I was like awasis chi, is that how you say what child is this? So I heard awasis and gichimanatu and yeah, so tell us a little bit about kind of what happens with that process of the language going back and forth.
Well, when you take English, you can translate it into Cree using the most appropriate words, because there's various words that can be used depending on the context. So as accurate as you can to English. But then when you go back, so what child is this? Is Kigo Awasis Awamari, right? That's the first line that we translated. Then when you retell it, Kigo Awasis, so what child? Marie Gatagunat. So that Mary is carrying, right? You wouldn't say what child is this? We say Kigo Awasis, so what child is Mary carrying? So it's no longer what child is this, it's who is she carrying? Gatagunat. Yeah. So it almost becomes its own little story in a retell.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. Yeah, because I mean the Cree language, like you take a word and it's got other words in it, right? Like it's not a literal word for word swap, right? Like to put English into Cree and Cree into English. I mean, the words are, you kind of almost have to unpack them. They're big long words that have like,
oh yeah,
roots and references, and to a damskau, it's a humbling to go and greet somebody. They're almost teachings as well as words. So yeah.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. It's really
beautiful.
beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's so lovely. It's exciting to think about, when I taught Cree this year here at EDFIN, and some of the students, grade 10, 11, and 12, had some understanding, but some of them had no understanding. And in fact, didn't really have connection to their language. So when they first started the class, they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to be in here. And then leaving, they all did a reflection at the end of the quarter. And all of the reflections it just made me so thrilled. I worked with another teacher who co-taught the class, Monica Bear, who's an amazing Cree language teacher. And we were completely floored and humbled at how coming out of the class, the kids could read. Maybe they weren't fluent speakers, but they could read. They could properly pronounce the Cree language in an authentic way. They could recognize words. And most of all, they identified with the language. There was almost a pride that took the place where there was no pride before, and a hunger for more. And unfortunately, the class had to end because we're just in a school structure. We can't just redesign the school year how we want to, but all of the students were sad to leave the class, and they were able to read and write syllabics where they didn't understand syllabics before. And so it was tremendous. The power of our language for our Indigenous youth is, that there's no argument for the need for them to know their language. So
that's beautiful. And I mean, that's another kind of chill moment there, right? I'm just going, oh, because it's such like, and I mean, that's, when you talk about like loss of land and culture and language is like, is a huge part of, right? Like the residential schools and everything, all these acts of colonialism. So to be able to like reclaim that and bring it back and give it back and have this resurgence, it's beautiful. I wish you could like take that into all the classes all year, right? Yeah,
right. And that needs to be done for us to preserve our language. It has to be immersed. It has to be a part of the process of walking in the two worlds, right? The non-Indigenous and the Indigenous world, and creating space for our Indigenous youth to reconnect to that and give them time, because it takes time. We only had a quarter, and in that quarter, what did we achieve, right? So yeah, I'm pretty passionate about it.
yeah, no, that's amazing. I'm so excited that this is like kind of another aspect of, I mean, you're bringing the language in song, but then in your day job you're bringing the language to Indigenous students and giving them back that, right? Like it's a powerful kind of mission that you have. So do you guys do singing in the class at all? Do you incorporate music into the teaching, or?
I'd love to, but they're teenagers.
Right.
They're all too cool for school. When I taught kindergarten at St. Francis back in actually 2012, before I recorded the songs, and we did singing there. But children are so beautiful. They openly just express, their passions and their loves and their emotions. So I'm working on the teenagers.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's always more of a challenge to get a teenager to do anything versus a young child, right? So, I mean, that's for sure. But I mean, it's amazing that you're able to still bring the language to them over the course of a quarter, right? And so is it grade 12 students or?
Well, my cohort here at EDFIN, we're piloting, I suppose piloting a program. It's always kind of been here. It started off as being an Indigenous wellness program, funded and in partnership with the Saskatoon Tribal Council. And then over time, the model was redefined. And then 2 or 3 years ago when I got here, we had a cohort of Indigenous students who were kind of being immersed in some language, but mostly culture, whether it be maybe having an elder in, or maybe doing beading, or doing some sort of Indigenous art. And then it expanded to having kind of cohorts in grade 9, 10, 11, and 12. So last year I would have been the 11 cohort because we didn't have a 12 cohort. And so my 11s that I've known since 10, who are basically my family, my students are my family, right? So creating those relationships and those connections was really important to help the success in the graduation. So I followed them to 12. And so now we have 9, 10, 11, and 12. We don't quite have language as part of the program yet. I was teaching it as part of my Indigenous Studies class. We'd have like language Fridays, or I would just speak the language during the class time. And then this year we had an official Cree language credited course, and it was really successful. They do have a Nehia cohort that comes up from the St. Francis program, but that's a different cohort to our Mio-Machuan cohort, which is our 9, 10, 11, and 12 Indigenous programming, which is more culture-based. But, you know, like I said, I put the language wherever I can put it.
That's awesome.
That's
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to get back to the music, we kind of just have like a couple of minutes left, but what do you hope audiences experience at the concert coming up?
I really hope it's a coming together of the, Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. I think that's one of the reasons why the symphony is really kind of being a part of this time of reconciliation and saying, okay, we're going to create space, because really that's what we are all trying to achieve, a world that is equitable and fair and welcoming and sharing of all nations, regardless of where you come from. And so I hope to see, a variety of people in the audience. But I just hope that people appreciate and maybe somehow take part in creating space for the language within their schools, within their organizations, within their world, because the language is really important. And it will take those alliances, it'll take that allyship and that partnership and that togetherness to keep our languages alive for, forever, essentially, for generations to come. So, yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. So just just kind of like closing thoughts on that. So what can people do, right? Like, so aside from like coming to the concert, obviously, and enjoying, that exposure to Cree language and like looking up your music, buying your albums and that kind of thing. But whether people are Indigenous or non-Indigenous, what are some things that people can do to bring that language into their day-to-day?
I think just being curious. It's always nice to be curious of maybe what you don't know, and be open and welcoming, and to make efforts, and say, how do I say hello? Time to say, okay, how do I say this? And just those little conversations of, I suppose, bridging that gap and saying, I want to know who you are. I want to get to know you, and, I want to make those relationships, and realize that we might laugh at you because you'll say it wrong, but that's part of being, a Nehia, is we like to laugh.
Teasing is part of the culture. Get used to it.
Culture. But creating space and being a part of this new chapter that we're all in.
Wow, that's beautiful. Good closing thoughts. Yeah. So thank you so much for being with us today, to discuss like music and language and teaching and translation and kind of all of these things. And of course, you're at the Saskatoon Symphony on December 4th, and it's going to be amazing. Kind of a Christmas concert. People are very invited to come. Is it online as well, or is it just live?
I believe it's streamed online. You can buy tickets to be part of the show online. And I also have a single coming out at the same time. Little Drummer Boy. I recorded Little Drummer Boy in Cree, and I'm really excited about it. It's very percussion based, and so that will also be released, and you can get that online, or you can buy the physical copy at the Symphony or at my website, FalynnBaptiste.com. So, yeah.
Awesome. All right. We got to plug in for Little Drummer Boy dropping soon. Thank you so much. So, Kishi Marcy, to our relative tonight, Falynn Baptiste, and you can look her up on her website, as she just mentioned. Niwa Gamaganak, all my relations, and believe me, we are all related, so act like you've got relations. This is Auntie Andy signing out from Homelands, originally produced on CFCR Community Radio 90.5 FM in Saskatoon, Homelands of the Métis and Treaty 6 territory. You can follow us on Twitter at Métis Homelands. You can email us at métishomelands@gmail.com, and this will also be viewable on our YouTube channel Homelands, so subscribe today. So that is everything. Marcy, thank you for listening. And Akoshi Mina, that's all. We'll see you later. Thank you so much, Falynn.